We're at the Selma National Park Service, Selma-to-Montgomery Center. We're in the main auditorium. Exhibition, Self-Discovery, Freedom, and Struggle in the African Experience. Jim Skinner, bust depicting Dr. William E. Colvin. Wow. Beautiful area here. You can tell these are maybe high school students. Look at these mannequins. Oh, wow. It's the Snick Singers. I have never seen a place like that. Dr. King right there. Wow. Stars for Freedom. Oh, yes. Selma to Montgomery. Look at that. Like an idea whose time has come. Not even the marching of mighty armies can halt us. We are moving to the land of freedom. Our latest stop in our intellectual CSI. The Harry Belafonte is on that stage, part of the Stars for Freedom concerts. Wow. Here we go. Some of the things the marshals wore on the march. Look at Fred David Gray with Solomon C. and Charles Conley. There's Fred Gray. That's why we're here. The aftermath of the march, Klan behavior. Another auditorium. Wow. Look at that. With that arc of the moral universe bending toward justice. Rufus Lewis. Oh, these are the heroes. Alabama State. This is what we're talking about. What a fantastic moment. That's why you go everywhere, y'all. You gotta see it all. Your vote is the one that counts. Your vote is the one that counts. Register. Strive toward freedom. Look at that. Student demonstrators. Wow. All right. The great Gwendolyn Patton, Tuskegee. Detroit, by the way, of Tuskegee. The moral purity of the student's purpose warded off the enveloping gloom that black people's freedom was not on Alabama's agenda. Here we go. Look at that. I got freedom on my mind. Let us ashe to the new ancestor, JoAnn Blackman Bland, foot soldier, educator, veteran, mother, grandmother, and friend. Ashe. This is where you go. The Selma to Montgomery National Memorial Trail. At the gateway to the campus of the Alabama State University, 1867. You see across the street there, Alabama State. And if you look across the street from the sign, you will see two houses there. The home of Nat King Cole as a child, and next to it, the house of Ralph David Abernathy. Go Hornets. Indeed. So y'all come to Montgomery, Alabama, do not miss the Montgomery Interpretive Center. Right next to the beautiful football stadium of the Alabama State Hornets. Alabama State, baby. Check it out. All right. Let's go back in. See y'all in a minute.
I'm loving this, by the way. I love what you're doing. That one glass encasement with the typewriter and the telephone. I wonder how many people have never seen those in person.
Seems like in person is the key to our liberation these days with these AI mad scientists. So yeah, we gotta go and see these places, and shout out to our new friend John Wells, a park ranger at the Interpretive Center there. They got a Selma to Montgomery Trail, and there are three major sites, and then there are all these affiliate sites between obviously the Great March of March 1965, the Selma-to-Montgomery March, Edmund Pettus Bridge, and all that. JoAnn is park ranger. He was at the Washington Monument site, and then has been here. I think he said for a year and a half. White dude, guy. So we peppered him with questions, test his historical knowledge, and not a lot of. In fact, we were the only visitors there. A couple of us that day, at that time, and then we went on. But it's just interesting. I said, are the people come frequently? He said, yeah, we had a group of about 20 earlier today. That was on Thursday, no, Friday. It's on Friday, and which was cool. No, it wasn't. It was on Thursday. Thursday, but if you're not at school on a school tour or happen to come through, it's not crowded. And then
Right.
of course, so
These
it's
places
not
should
bad.
be good everything to everybody. Welcome
Good
to
everything, everyone. Yes,
our session number 314 and count.
314.
Yeah. Being together, I'm being dragged out more frequently to vital places, and I'm saying yes, something I rarely do.
Okay. Oh
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Because it's important.
Okay.
To your point, we have been, last week, the internet, we've had several classes. Like last week, I couldn't even, everything froze, and it's never happened before. Things that have never happened before are happening now with the internet. And I'm like, interesting. So what
Mm-hmm.
we can't stop is when we're together and these
That's right.
of knowledge and gathering, which is what people used to do before, which that telephone, that typewriter, flyers and meetings. And this is how we did it. And for people who say the marches don't matter or these things don't matter, that's, what do you say to them?
Take on places. I mean, I don't even get into a conversation with people. If it's interesting, yesterday, shout out to my young brothers who last time I saw them, we were all in Atlanta at Sister Nina's center, and it'd be good to see her again tomorrow, since he's finally bringing belonging beyond Brown to Nubia, which is beautiful. We've been talking about that a long time. But some of her students came this weekend, so they've been here in Montgomery with others of their teachers, and so we were talking. And at the symposium yesterday, um, a couple of them asked questions as we were in open conversation, and um, one young brother from Houston asked, and he said, a lot of this I didn't know, and I didn't know growing up, and so how do we help young people? How do we help young people know this information? And I said, well, you from Houston, right? I said, yeah. I said, yeah. I said, have you been to the Gregory Library? He said, no, I haven't been over there yet. I said, well, next time you home, go and take a 6, 7 year old with you. And when you go, and this is a room, probably I'd say a good plurality of the people, certainly a plurality, maybe a third, maybe half. The people in the room were lawyers. And so, which is a lot of community activists, a lot of people there, and of course, there the Gray sitting there, shout out to Fred and Carol Gray, of course, still swinging with both fists. And I said, if you introduce a young person to that, long before they get to be your age, your early 20s, then it will become normal to them. And so when somebody lies on their ancestors later in life, they're like, no, I know better than that. Not because I saw it on social media or went to a movie, because I stood in the old segregated school that's now a museum. And when you start talking about how Black people fought to make America a more perfect union, I can put up a church finger and say, no, that's not what Dr. Smith, the dentist who helped in Smith versus Allwright, was fighting for. He had a very healthy dental practice, and the Black community in Houston was very strong. What he was doing was getting these white people up off his neck. So you can say what you want, but I know better because I was there. And so you can't replace. You probably saw what that mad scientist, the addled CEO of Palantir, Alex Karp, who some people say is Black, but he says I'm whatever you think I am, said about AI this week. I thought was hilarious. Um, when he says that if you're going to disrupt the economic and therefore the political power significantly of one party's base, highly educated, often female voters who vote mostly Democrat, and military and working class people who do not feel supported, and you feel like you believe that that's going to work out politically, you're in an insane asylum. And he said that because he said my technology. He didn't say my technology, but his, and the rest of these mad scientists, adult brain people. He says AI is going to disrupt what he described as humanities based, largely democratic voters. He said they're going to replace their jobs. All the people who think for a living and who do writing and all that's gone. He said, and that's going to push the whole society in favor of the plumbers and the gardeners and those are our people. That's the Republican base. Okay, you circus clown, no problem. Turn it all off. Where are y'all? We're at none of your business. So for a young person, so
Love that address. I love that address. Yes. And shout
yeah,
out to Dr. Dina Gilbert and you, Reverend Dr. Otis Moss and Dr. Bettina Love and Dr. Uh, uh, Daniel Black. On Sunday at 5 p.m., we will be screening Beyond Brown in Nubia. And I'm looking forward to it and handing the ball off. So incredible work being done. But because we're only on social media scrolling, and the people who are working, it's really hard to see all of the work that's being done, which is why we do need to be out among people and
that's
community.
right.
And
That's right. If they turn it off, there'll be young people say all the time, "Can you imagine if Dr. King had Instagram?" I said, "I sure can." Wouldn't have been no damn social movement. Would have been a lot of T-shirts, been a lot of hashtags, but maybe not a lot of not a lot of actual on the ground footwork. So yeah, turn it all off, Alex. You and your friends. But I mean, you should probably check with the Chinese first because if y'all don't know what Huawei is, please understand that whatever lunch that Alex Karp and his friends and Peter Thiel and them think they're preparing for the world, the Chinese already have a sumptuous meal and they're gonna make them eat every forkful. So y'all don't think
to your
this is gonna help y'all. But
point,
either way, it's in person. You have to do it in person, no question.
so many people have a very short memory and a short framework, and I keep going back to folk who have been planning, even in this current iteration of what they're calling war, what I don't know what this is, but you think Iran hasn't been planning and prepping for this? You think China hasn't been planning and prepping for this? We are the ones that every 4 years seem to have amnesia about what this, except for the 92% and 80%. But we seem to be the only ones forgetful of what it is. They've been planning and
Planning,
prepared, and
planning, preparing, and suffering.
we get a go bag at the last minute. But yeah,
That's right. Well, a go something, a virtual go bag, I think. I'm not sure. I'm always wondering, like, where y'all going?
correct.
You got a go bag, but where are you going? Where are you? I mean, do you know how to filter water at least so that you won't drink contaminated water? You know how to run it through charcoal, or do you have some charcoal, or did you go to the store? Oh, you can't go to the store. How do you make charcoal? I know. Okay, that's a pretty bag, but where are you going? So, and there are places to go, and I think the people who know where to go aren't broadcasting where to go because that would defeat the purpose of a go
Correct.
bag.
Right.
So,
And if
yeah.
you don't have access to YouTube to teach you how to do the things that you've been relying on, to how to make charcoal or fire or filter water, if there's no place to go to even find out, what do you do? Oh, books.
That's exactly right.
Are there books? You have those
And
books?
books,
Yeah.
got to get these. No question. Look, hey, got to keep collecting. It's really unfortunate. And we had a conversation this week with Joe Horn earlier this week in Sirius, and who was on most of the time. He comes on usually on Saturdays with Wilmer Leon, but we asked Joe to come on with us during the week to have a conversation. And you someone had asked what to read. It might have been Lamont who started, and then people calling in, what do you read? What do you study? Now, in the sense of, well, we'll ask Gerald what he does. When we came in, and Gerald offered a number of sources: Chinese sources, Cuban sources, sources beyond the United States, and somebody else just called in and mentioned France 24, which is an excellent source. We didn't mention Amy Goodman in Democracy Now!, but that's a good source as well. It could kind of surround us in addition to the stuff. But when you read the commercial news, entertainment, mass media here in the United States, it's unreadable and unwatchable if you're looking for anything beyond the most basic um, Now, I won't call them facts. I'll say information, but narratives shape how we think about things. So even this morning's New York Times, this morning's Financial Times, Wall Street Journal, talking about particularly the Times, which is doing a chef's kiss beautiful job of falling back into their consistent pattern of propaganda. You're reporting this like the United States is winning this war. U.S. bombs this, U.S. or let me go over to Al Jazeera, and then you get the tracker and you start the joint attack, for example, that just happened. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps uh, saying they had launched missiles and drones at Israel in coordination with Tehran's Lebanese proxy Hezbollah. Now, in the New York Times, you'll see Israel attacking Hezbollah in Lebanon. Israel's attacking Lebanon, and they have a whiteout from Tel Aviv. So if a stone fell from the sky, or if a bird dropped a worm that they had caught and it hit the ground in Tel Aviv, you wouldn't know about it because they've whited all that out because they're trying to shape the narrative. And so, since uh, the end of last month, since the 28th, Al Jazeera is reporting at least 1,444 people have been killed and 18,551 have been injured in U.S.-Israel attacks on Iran. But we don't have any numbers on the other side. You say, well, this number of soldiers died. This is a U.S. soldier. I don't know. I don't trust none of them numbers. You understand? What I do trust is people calling in and connecting with each other and saying that they're prepping the military hospitals in Germany. For what? It was 7 or 8 people passed, and they were, yeah, okay. And then, you got to look and see what's going on in Saudi. The Saudis said they intercepted a drone yesterday. Actually, 6 of them, 5 in the kingdom's eastern region and 1 in the so-called empty quarter desert zone. Qatar said they successfully intercepted an incoming missile. Bahrain had a siren alert, another siren alert, and the Ministry of the Interior urged all citizens to remain calm, all citizens. Oman, 2 people were killed by falling drones in Oman, and the Sultan there held a call urging dialogue and regional de-escalation. And Formula One races in Bahrain and Saudi Arabia will be canceled or rescheduled. The Bahrain race is right now is scheduled for the 10th to the 12th of April. And then the Saudis are supposed to have an F1 race a week later. Now, if you just read that from Al Jazeera and put that together, what does that tell you? That tells you that the Gulf states are nervous, that they are under attack, literal attack from Iran, that they are, while they are U.S. allies generally, and the United States got all these military bases over there, what are they saying? Hey, man, y'all need to stop. Israel, United States, baby, bozo, you need to stop. Why? Because you messing up our little arrangement. We let y'all put these bases here. Iran's not going away. You're not going to bomb them into non-existence. They have a decentralized military chain of command anyway. Uh, if you read even just a little bit about it, the Ayatollah is the one who can call off or call on anything, but if the Ayatollah doesn't give the order, and last I checked, you killed the old man and replaced him with his son, which means what? You just basically upgraded how long there's going to be an Ayatollah. You stupid. Anyway, the point is that with him not giving the order, any general in any of the provinces who commands the provinces and the military there acts on their own authority. Nobody else can tell them to stop. So you took out the Ayatollah, replaced him with a guy almost half his age, and he's going into hiding. And meanwhile, the Western propaganda is like he was injured. He must have been injured. Okay, fine. Guess what? He ain't saying nothing, which means what? You can't call off the war. So I guess what I'm saying is, if you're relying on Western news, mass media, entertainment, mass media to be your report, then you're not going to do anything except repeat their talking points. And then, you'll say, well, when are we going to call off the war? Well, I don't know who we is, but I know this. Iran ain't Venezuela. And the people in harm's way aren't bozo, aren't his little dead man suit friend. Today's New York Times has a long article about Jared Kushner with his dead man suit on. Yeah, that's right. Trump is orchestrating a war on vibes. Vibes, yeah. In a minute, we'll be able to see your bones and continue to deteriorate at the rate you've been deteriorating. So maybe we can all make our own determination on what your bones are telling you. But yeah, I mean, the dead man is trying to raise $5 billion. And finally, the New York Times had the courage to write it on the front page of how this is breaking down, how the Saudis gave him $2 million out of their investment fund at the end of Bozo's first term, and how he said after the election of 2024 that there will be a 4-year pause on him raising money because he doesn't need to. And of course, everything that comes out of Jared Kushner's mouth, like everything that comes out of his wife's mouth, like everything that comes out of his brothers-in-law's mouth, like everything that comes out of his father-in-law's mouth is a lie. I don't even know his name is Jared Kushner, for that matter. And so I'm not raising any money, whatever. He's trying to raise $3 billion more. And guess who's got the pocketbook open with the right of first refusal anytime he puts out another fundraising round? The Saudis, Qatar, the UAE. But right now they ducking and covering and telling Bozo, hey man, have you lost your damn mind? Get out. And what is Bozo doing? What are you worried about? Staying out of jail. So, hey, the war goes on. But, meanwhile, we have to, while paying attention to all that, we have to stay focused. We got to stay in some rhythm of focus. And, it's a beautiful thing today. And, for a few minutes today, we're going to talk on the theme common humanity, which is all of us, versus exclusion. What does that mean? It means, when you decide that you have a group or community or society and you're going to start excluding people based on these various criteria, arbitrary criteria, you have begun to go down the path. You've begun to go down the path of destruction. This is a distinction between social structure and governance. And we're going to talk about that. And we're going to talk about it while we're here in Montgomery, which at one time, right before the Civil War jumped off, they had the largest number of people who, well, let me ask you, Prof, have you ever been to Montgomery?
I have not. I've not. Can you hear me?
But you've been to Alabama, though.
I've never
Yes,
been
can
to
you hear me?
Alabama. I've never been to Alabama. The furthest I've been to Mississippi, but I've never been to Alabama. And I've driven through Tennessee to get to Florida by accident because my mother was lost and we woke up in
I
Tennessee.
see. Well, good. So you can say you've been there then. Hey, man, that's good to say. Oh, yeah. It's it's interesting. I went out this morning for a day. They're preparing for a marathon. Otherwise, I would have been out in front of the Legacy Museum again, like last year when we were here. 2 years ago, we were here. But I went out to see just for a day and saw all the marathoners. I guess they got a half marathon or something going on after I asked the cops and some sisters who were out in the street and what's going on. And so, but as I was walking around, walking the block in downtown Montgomery, I walked past, of course, an address that is now one of the buildings owned by the Equal Justice Institute. And it's right on the town square. And it used to be a place where the devilish accountants who trafficked in human bodies had our people captive, with a particular emphasis on children, which is, I think, one of the reasons why your brother Brian Stevenson and his folks acquired it. And there's a historical marker out in front of the building on one side. EJI put it up, I want to say, in maybe 2013. It's a description of the building and what used to happen there in terms of human trafficking. And on the other side, there's a description of the city of Montgomery, one time the largest city in the state of Alabama, kind of like how Galveston, when we were there in last June, was at one time the largest city in Texas. Human trafficking has a lot to do with that. And how on the eve of the Civil War, or at least the year before the Civil War, 1860, Montgomery, and by the way, the telegram that was sent to order the Confederate Army, military rather, to start bombing Fort Sumter in South Carolina was sent from where I'm sitting right now, sent from the city of Montgomery, which was the capital of the Confederacy. We talked about that before. I was telling the Morehouse, the young brothers from Morehouse, as maybe y'all ever been to Montgomery? No. So okay, before you leave, you want to go see Dr. King's church, right? Dexter Avenue. Yeah. Okay. Well, when you leave there, just walk up about a block and you're going to see a big block of marble, and it's going to have inscribed on the side, this is the first place that Dixie was ever played in public during the Civil War. And then you go up another 2 blocks, and that's the Alabama State Capitol with the statue of Jefferson Davis. And met a sister yesterday who is actually an archivist at the Alabama State Archive. And I'm definitely coming back. We're going to come back and spend some time with her to go through the archives and look at the stuff. And so she was reinforcing, yeah, you got to go to see all that. But this was the capital of the Confederacy before it moved to Richmond, and it never really lost its prestige. But on that marker in front of the EJI building, it describes Montgomery, and it says just before the Civil War, there were more trafficked human beings, more Africans who had been subjected to human trafficking in the city of Montgomery than in New Orleans, than in just about every other city in the country. Very important to understand that. This was no small concern. And it is also, in many ways, the city of Montgomery and the state of Alabama for sure, but Montgomery in many ways to the United States is akin to what Philadelphia in some ways was to England during the so-called Declaration of Independence era. This is the place where all those forces converge and decisions had to be made in the wake. And we'll get to that in a minute. But again, just want to be mindful and thankful to the folks over at the Selma-to-Montgomery National Trails Montgomery stop, which of course, as you saw in the video, is just across the street. Well, actually, I think, technically it's on the campus of Alabama State University. It's just across the street from the gate, one of the entrance gates. And so you have the center here, you cross the street. There on the corner, there are 2 white framed houses, 2 simple wood frame houses. The first one on the corner is the birthplace of the great Nat King Cole, whose parents, of course, very involved in the church. Father was a minister, from Montgomery, Nat Cole. And then right next door, like you walk across, like neighbors walk across a little narrow strip of grass in between, the next house was the home of Ralph David Abernathy, a graduate of Alabama State University with a degree in mathematics. Ralph Abernathy's 100th birthday was this week. It was the 11th of March, 1926. And, standing there, a wave of embarrassment kind of washed over us. Why? Because I didn't see anything about that. And I didn't mention it because I wasn't aware. And we were on the air on Wednesday morning. So I want to apologize for missing that. I know better. I usually check to see, whose birthday it is, who is a person that is fairly well known or even lesser known, but who made an incredible contribution to our people and to our common humanity. And I miss Ralph Abernathy. And I thought to myself, why didn't I see it anywhere? So, of course, I did just a little bit of nominal digging, and I still didn't see a whole lot about it. Now, if it were Dr. King or if it were Malcolm X or even Harriet Tubman or someone, if it were a celebrity, you might see, it makes me think about all the centennial observations in the last few years. Duke Ellington at 100, Dizzy Gillespie at 100, Louis Armstrong at 100. The entertainers, great, brilliant culture meaning makers. But Ralph Abernathy was a serious guy, and he was a person who, anytime you saw Martin Luther King was getting threatened with a gun, Ralph Abernathy was too, because they was damn near joined at the hip. And it was Ralph Abernathy who was right next to Martin King when he drew his last breath, some of his last breaths on the earth. And it was him who patted Martin King on the cheek after the assassin had shot him and said, it's Ralph Martin, it's okay. And he said he was trying to talk, but he couldn't talk. And so, for his 100th anniversary, his centennial to pass without public comment, that's kind of disturbing to me. And I'm talking about, I was looking at the Montgomery Examiner and, I'm like, well, hey. So anyway, that's right there. And then, of course, as you come across the street from the houses, there's the stone arch through which you pass to continue along the outskirts of the Alabama State University. And that Montgomery Interpretive Center, all of them, but that Montgomery Interpretive Center, as you all saw just a little glimpse of it, very important. Some of the names you saw there, Bernard Lafayette, the great JoAnn Bland, who referred to a lot of those folks whose names we don't often lift, but whose names are pretty easily remembered because there are living folk among them, and there are others who knew these folk who are here. Ms. Bland called them foot soldiers. I was watching her ritual. She made transition this year, and was watching her ritual. If you go on YouTube and just type in JoAnn, JoAnn, Bland, BLAND, a memorial, you can see it held in Selma. And she, I mean, just a powerful, powerful sister. She joined the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee at the advanced age of 8 years old. She's an 8-year-old joining SNCC. She and her older sister were among the youngest who were attacked on the Edmund Pettus Bridge, March the 7th, 1965, and which is only a few weeks, before birthday of some people in this conversation right now. So she was only, I think she was 11 when she was attacked. And she tells a story, of course, about hearing the head of one of the ladies who was in the march, one of the sisters, hit the concrete pavement as some punk ass cop hit her. She said, "I'll never forget that sound." And then she passed out after being attacked. She said she woke up in the vehicle with her head in her sister's lap, needed 26 stitches, blood covered all over her lap. JoAnn Bland spent the rest of her life. She eventually became joined the military, went to New York for school, and then came back eventually to the South and started not just a museum, a kind of tour space, a cultural space, and right there in Selma. And it's just beautiful to see her there on those walls, to see her in the not just depicted but described. And it's very important to understand that those conversations that we need to have about who we are to each other, the governance formations, those are the things that are going to keep us out of the abyss. It's very clear. And so we'll come back to that in a moment, because I'm going to talk a little bit about the conversation that we had at the Fred Gray Symposium. This was the second annual Fred Gray National Symposium. This is the official logo of the Fred Gray Institute, Fred D. Gray, Fred David Gray Institute for Human and Civil Rights. And this is the, forgive me because I'm an inveterate scribbler. So I didn't scribble on, I scribbled on this side, not this side. This is the Fred Gray. This was the dinner that we had on Thursday night here. Shout out to Mr. Cal Walker, Brother Cal Walker, my friend Cal Walker, who is on the board of trustees at the Tuskegee History Center, spent years at Cornell. And when I walked in the room, Cal was the first person the second person. I'll tell you about the first in a minute. No, he is the first person who greeted me. And he said his son, Eric, shout out to Eric, my friend Eric, who Walker sent by way of his father, not only greetings to us, always grateful for that, brother, and a good pat on the back and a hug for you, and say, y'all keep doing what you're doing. We're educating, we're connecting. And as I said last week when we were together at the Malcolm X banquet in Atlanta, I feel like the centering of our job is to do what I'm doing right now, which is to help people become aware of other people. And as we do that, then people, of course, can connect and make their own connections. And whether you turn the lights on or off won't matter, Mr. Addle-brained Alex Karp. But he put in my hand, he said, Eric wanted me to make sure that I gave you this. This is the memorial program to James Turner. I didn't have a physical copy of this. The great James Turner, who is the founding director of the Africana Studies Research Center in Cornell, and that's his memorial. James Turner is a giant. So as we were standing there, David Fleer, who's the director of advancement for the Gray Institute, my friend David Fleer, came up and we greeted each other. And I was standing there saying, man, this is incredible, because James Turner is a founding parent of what we call Black Studies in the United States of America. I said, if not for James Turner and his generation, I wouldn't have a job as a professor. Wouldn't be no Black Studies in the academy. Even as we have jailbroken the university and returned Black Studies in many ways, or working to return it to its absolute founding, grounding principles, which is community, not the academy. But I was standing there and I said, what's crazy is James Turner, who's always brilliant, but as his friends, contemporaries, people like James Conyers, Dr. James Conyers, and others would tell us. He said James Turner would say, and I've heard him say it too. He said I was kind of in the streets in New York. He's a New Yorker, New York City guy, and he said, I'm running around being a little unruly in my youth. And he said I met this man who put a book in my hand and kind of took a liking to me. And next thing you know, I was one of his students, and for the rest of my life, I was his student till he made transition. In fact, at one point, he was able to get this brother to come and be a lecturer, meaning kind of faculty member at Cornell. And he's talking about, of course, John Henry Clark. And so as we were talking, I was standing there, I said, tell you, Cal and David, what's crazy about that is, you put this in my hand from this legend, and thank Eric again for this. And the brother, James Turner, had his life completely transformed by John Henry Clark, I said, who was born maybe 30, 45 minutes from here in Union Springs, Alabama. We passed the sign for Union Springs on the way to Montgomery. And it started laughing. It all comes full circle. So, I'm going to talk a little bit about what happened at the Institute on Thursday and then Friday. And as I told them, I'm very happy to have that as be able to do that we're able to do that because of this space. And so, and then I had a brief conversation with Tori Bailey. Tori Bailey is the owner of a radio station, black owned and operated radio station in nearby Tuscumba, Alabama, WZZA. WZZA is one of the sponsors, along with a lot of other folks, of the gathering, the convening here. It's called the Soul of the Shoals. The Soul of the Shoals, as in Muscle Shoals, Alabama. Her parents, Robert Carl Bailey and Odessa Bailey, the founders or the creators of WZZA Radio, and she has inherited that. She's also president of the Music Preservation Society here in Alabama and organizes the annual W.C. Handy Music Festival. A lot of people don't know W.C. Handy's born here. We associate him with Memphis, but Alabama is his home. And she was talking about, she said, I'm going to start pulling clips from y'all talking and playing on WZZA. I said, man, I love that, because that's what we're about, is making this connection and doing this work. And, you never know, and we can never know how many people we are connected with and are connected to us, and how we build community, because it's really inestimable. People can try to run the numbers, but it's impossible to run the numbers in terms of people coming together. But I will say that I haven't gone anywhere where there aren't a lot of people who are in this space. And I think a lot of it has to do with the places that we go, because we know we're going to places to do light work, and people doing light work find each other. And so I know week after week, month after month, year after year, all we're doing is basically making sure that we can do everything we can to connect people who are already working, and connect them with the vast number of people who want to work but may not know where to go. So as folks are listening, you've gotten some more places. Now, with that in mind, I want to bring this brother up before I say anything else. Those of you who have subscriptions to Sirius XM, who listen to 126, you may have heard on Urban View this week, if you listen to Urban View Mornings, a brother called in named Leroy. And Leroy called in from Alabama, and he said, I got a ticket. I registered for the conference in Montgomery, the Fred Gray conference, because I want to see you. I got something to give you. And if y'all remember, we had a moment of levity in the conversation, because he said he invited us to come to a gig he was playing. He's a musician. Kind of find out, as we had a long conversation yesterday, he plays saxophone. And he said that, I'm have this gig, and it's at my homeboy's mansion. Is it mansion? And so mansion in the South, the thing I think of immediately as an African son in the South is these plantation houses. I've been in them. I've been in Nashville. My mama went in them houses, and I was a little kid. I was with her. So I know when you say mansion in the South, I'm like, so I said, what is it? Is it what kind of mansion? And he didn't really say, but then when pressed, he said, oh, yeah. So, I said, oh, no, man, I'm not coming there. Now, of course, it wasn't his place, it's his boy's place, and he had a gig to play there. And so it wasn't like he had a choice. And so, we laughed about it. And then Lamont kept going with it, pushing it. And I was like, yeah, okay, all right, all right. So anyway, long story short, the first person I saw yesterday morning, on Friday morning, one of the first people, was Brother Leroy Botiford, a son of this state, a good African, a teacher, a musician, businessman, educator. In fact, he had to leave after we had the conversation yesterday. He had to go in the afternoon because he was going to teach some kids. He's a working musician as well. And he's also a hell of an artist. So the thing that he wanted to give me was this. He's from Troy, Alabama. Who else is from Troy, Alabama? JoAnn Lewis. This is a JoAnn Lewis drawing that he did in charcoal with
Wow.
pencils and brushes. This
Wow.
is the original. I said, did you make prints? He said, yeah, I made prints. But look, you see the detail? I can't really see. This
Oh,
ain't nothing but his hand and charcoal.
God.
Isn't that something?
Did he give that to you?
He did.
Dr. Carr?
He did. He did.
Okay. You need to roll,
You know,
frame that.
oh, no. It was in a frame.
Okay,
And
you
he
go.
took it out so that he could roll it and put it in the, oh yeah, but here's the thing. For somebody like him, this is just work. In other words, he can make this again, but he's not going to, and believe me, look, the reason I was careful because we put it in the artist can here. So I got that. It's going back in there, and I will take it in and have it reframed. But that's what he does. And in fact, as we were talking, Tori Bailey, the owner and operator of WZZA, she said, "Oh, I got a lot of his artwork. He's just that gifted, and he's a musician, saxophone player." I'm saying so. When we think about someone like the CEO of Palantir, Alex Karp, I have no doubt that he's a brilliant man. But can you do that? so this well, I don't have to do it because of AI. I don't have enough hair on my head right now to tousle it and make it go all over my head so I can look like something out of a Thomas Dolby video. She blinded me with science. But Alex Karp, I'm not mad at you, my friend, because you could turn off all the energy in the world. And you know what? Leroy Botiford will just use his hand and whatever's available and recreate beauty. Because you all seem to think somehow you can repress the human spirit. And I didn't know Leroy Botiford. I didn't know him until he called Sirius this week and hadn't seen him to embrace him and to receive that love and reflect that love until yesterday. And in the process, he said, I want to tell you something. And I want you to tell Professor Hunter this. He said, yeah, I changed my life. What you tell? He said, man, every week I don't miss. And he started talking about the importance of this space. And we sitting there, I want to know about everybody's life. So I'm just tell me what you missing. We sitting there, he's talking. He said, yeah, my mom was in Muscle Shoals with Aretha Franklin. That's what you talking about. He said she was a backup singer for Clarence Carter. I said, Clarence Carter, I'll be stroking. We started laughing. Me and Reba sitting there. I said, I'll be stroking. Yeah. She was with them. And he started talking about how he said, I said, your mama was a backup singer for Clarence Carter and she was in Muscle Shoals with Aretha Franklin? He said, yeah. So he started telling us some Aretha Franklin stories his mama had told. I said, your mama need to be recorded, do a memoir or something. And I said, wait a minute. The only time I know for sure that Aretha Franklin was in Muscle Shoals, Alabama recording was when she recorded I Never Loved a Man Like I Love You. He said, yeah. I said, come on, man. You can't defeat black people. Do you understand? The common thread of blackness is that we have a governance formation and we have a governance relationship that in order to know it, you got to know us. And we are not known in principal part, because we don't care to be known. Why would I tell that to somebody Now at some point, I'm sure somebody who's in here among the thousands of people every week who are in community with us, I'm thinking now about the academics trying to make a name for themselves by working on something. Then, yeah, oh, I gotta find this guy. I want to find him. I want to work. I want to write an article. Okay, fine. All that social structure. Go write the deaf white studies reports so you can go explain to somebody how, this is somebody else who's working to perfect American democracy or whatever mock lie you have made up in your head to communicate. But let me just tell you, this is part of our story because it's part of our community. And it's very important to understand that people aren't doing it. We were talking and Tori was saying that, people come, they want to offer us money to buy a radio station or they're going to move. He said, this ain't about the money. This is about having a place where the black newspapers can be read over the air and we connect with that. This is a place where when there are public meetings, we can announce it on the radio. And I said, there are elders, there are others who rely on both your AM and FM band. I said, can I listen online? She said, yeah. So I typed in WZZA when I got back here and yeah, you pull it right up. And I'm saying that's a benefit of the technology, but never forget when as the so-called civil rights, human rights movement was blossoming in the 1950s and 60s, whether you go to Atlanta and Dr. King would get on the radio in the same block where the SCLC office was, whether you go to Jackson, Mississippi or Nashville, Tennessee, people got communications in the most intimate local ways. And so, it's just really, really a blessing to be here. And so thinking about that along the line of the theme, common humanity versus exclusion, I'll get right to the point this morning because before we leave here today, we want to go see some other stuff. We will probably go by the Legacy Museum with to see the museum and then go to a lot of other places. We covered a lot of ground. I was so happy we got a chance to go over to Alabama State's campus on Thursday and not only see the Interpretive Center in Montgomery, but spend some time on the campus after we passed Nat Cole and Ralph Abernathy's house and stood there for a minute. Traverse the campus and see the beautiful place. That stadium, by the way, that football stadium of Alabama State is the largest stadium in Montgomery. It's a beautiful edifice. In fact, you almost get the echoes of Plessy versus Ferguson on the campus of Alabama State because it's almost like the state has given enough money for Alabama State to have a big, beautiful campus in a way so that, okay, y'all got yours. Don't come over here with us. Although I know that's not the case or not. Yes, Alabama still got Negroes running down football field. But on the way out, we passed the street where I think Fred Gray was born. It's renamed for him, Fred Gray Street. And, the neighborhood is very modest, very modest, these intimate, modest spaces. People may be familiar with the name Johnny Carr. If you're not, look up Johnny and Arlen Carr Sr. Cars, same last name as me. We probably escaped the same plantation. But at any rate, the Carr house is very modest, little small house just behind the campus of Alabama State University. Johnny Carr and Arlen Carr Sr., the lead title plaintiffs in Carr versus Montgomery Board of Education. That was the desegregation of the Montgomery schools. I'm trying to think who the lawyer was. Oh, yeah, Fred Gray, along with Jack Greenberg from the NAACP Legal Defense Fund and another brother named Charles Jones. They desegregated the specific district that Montgomery was in, but that came right after the case where Fred Gray filed a lawsuit, went to Supreme Court and desegregated the schools in the whole state of Alabama. That was the famous Lee versus Macon County case. And that becomes particularly important because shout out to the Tuskegee Historical History Center, my man TC and a bunch of other folks. This is a book that just came out. We were able to get copies on Thursday night as we came to the opening ceremony. This is a book called Children of the Struggle and the Ancestors Who Stayed. This book is about the Tuskegee Institute High School. This is a collection of memories from the class of 1964. Sonia Parker Ramond and Beatrice Adams are the editors, Sonia Parker Ramon, Professor Emeritus of Social Work at Cal State East Bay. She is actually a native of the region. I think she might be a graduate of Tuskegee Institute High School. But the reason I love this book is because this is the kind of work that we all have to do if you're connected with these governance institutions. So even, as we've already talked about this, we're going to have a class called the Black University, a public class. I did the pilot at Howard in the fall, and this is one of our HBHSs. And this Fred Gray, this book is 350 pages of memories of these Africans. In fact, the book opens with acknowledgments, and I love how they wrote it. It said, in the African tradition, we must begin by honoring all the ancestors who gave us their stories, our lives, and our opportunities. Come on. And then, of course, they go on to thank everybody. Thank Fred Gray, who Martin Luther King called the chief counsel of the civil rights movement. And I would say absolutely. That's what Fred Gray was. That's what Fred Gray is. And so in the children's struggle, just going there to these places allows you to not only feel the spirit of the ancestors, but to remember what they meant and what they mean. So when we passed the house, we got out and walked in front of the house. It's still a house. People live in there. Johnny and Arlen Carr Sr.'s house. Carr versus Montgomery Board of Education. Fred Gray, attorney. And then Lee versus Macon County just before that desegregated the schools. And we were talking with people from the History Center who said, as Fred Gray and them worked to desegregate the Alabama schools, they didn't want these young people from Tuskegee Institute High School to go to the white school. And in fact, when some of them tried to go into the white school after the order came down, the same George Wallace who ordered troops to the University of Alabama ordered troops to the white school in Tuskegee. Troops to stop these high school students. Now, ultimately, of course, there's a Booker T. Washington High School now in Tuskegee. I've been on that campus. In fact, I think maybe the first time I was there, Mr. Farrakhan was coming because the Nation of Islam had a rally over there. And actually, it's the time I did a workshop with the great Abdul Alim Shabazz, Lonnie Shabazz, of course, there on the campus of Booker T. Washington High School. And then there's another, Notasulga High School in Tuskegee. But just think about that. I don't want to go to school with you, and I don't want you coming to school with me. And so, we want to destroy segregation as a legal concept, as a political concept, to make sure everybody has equity and equal rights. But what we don't want to do is lose the strength and memory of our governance formations. And perhaps the price has been too steep and too dear in that regard. But standing there at Johnny Carr's house, I was like, wow. And then yesterday, as I just mentioned that in passing in my remarks, a sister came up in the elevator and she said, oh yeah, I knew Johnny Carr well. I knew her husband. Her husband's whole life was voting rights, and so was hers. And she said, yeah, because ultimately Johnny Carr becomes the head of the Montgomery Improvement Association. I think she was like the fourth or fifth leader, maybe the fifth leader of the MIA. Initially, of course, being Martin Luther King. And you heard me mention Rufus Lewis in passing. If you watch the video, Rufus Lewis, of course, whose papers are at Trenholm State University. I'm sorry, not university, Trenholm State Community College here in Montgomery. Rufus Lewis, who is considered one of the parents of Montgomery and Alabama's generally voting, which means the country's voting rights movement. He lived into his 90s. He made transition in 1999. He was born in 1906 here in Montgomery. He went to Alabama State when it was Alabama State Teachers College. And then he went to the Alabama State Lab School. They had a high school on campus. They still got a school on campus. We saw it on Thursday, but Alabama State there's been a book written, in fact, on that high school. Shout out to my man, Al Campbell, who's a professor of psychology at Howard University, who grew up on that campus. He's from here. His mother, I think, taught there. But at any rate, no, I think Rufus Lewis went to Fisk. He went to Fisk. But he came back to Montgomery. He was one of those founders of the Montgomery Improvement Association as well. You heard me mention Rufus Lewis. He was on faculty at Alabama State for a long time. Was a football coach. And in fact, in our vast and growing compendium of conversations if you all search it closely enough, and it's got a searchable device tool. You'll hear me talk about Rufus Lewis. And also, I want to say this was maybe 2 years ago. I was in Philadelphia with somebody who's from Birmingham. We were talking about historically black high schools and football rivalries. Parker High School being one of the big schools in Birmingham. And it's just amazing now to think about how these connections work. I bring it up because Rufus Lewis was a legendary coach. He was well known in the state of Alabama. And so I remember talking about Rufus Lewis with this elder. So at any rate, I mean, the intimacy with which we can approach thinking about ourselves. And again, if you want to do research on Rufus Lewis, if you ever find yourself in Alabama, in Montgomery, you can go to Trenholm State. Trenholm State's named for Council Trenholm, who was at one time the kind of legendary president of Alabama State University. He was the president when his wife and her friends, including the leaders of the Montgomery Women's Political Council, the great JoAnn Robinson, who was a professor at Alabama State and the teacher of Fred Gray. Council Trenholm was the president of Alabama State, and he's the one who, if you all remember, we talked about this, and you can read about it in JoAnn Robinson's memoir on the Montgomery bus boycott and the women who started the movement. It is President Trenholm who calls his faculty member, his colleague and faculty member, JoAnn Robinson, into the office and said, well, y'all been using the mimeograph machine to run off some flyers about this boycott? Yeah. Okay. Well, be careful. Why? Because his wife is helping them distribute the stuff. And Trenholm got to be the one to be the face of Alabama State in front of these white boys who run the state of Alabama. So again, y'all don't know us and you'll never know us. But at any rate, and that's on purpose. But Rufus Lewis's papers, 40,000 documents, 40,000 plus documents are at Trenholm State College, Community College here in Montgomery. And they're there because Gwen Patton from Detroit, who went to Tuskegee, shout out to the Golden Tigers. Gwen Patton, who's one of the leaders of the Tuskegee student movement. We were talking about that yesterday. Gwen Patton was the person who, when she was working at Trenholm State, created the first archive at a community college in this country. And that archive is at Trenholm State because she said the people who engaged in this movement, what Miss JoAnn Bland might call the foot soldiers, don't often get recognized in a way that kind of puts the emphasis on the fact that without them, there would have been no movements. So therefore, she said, I want to have an archive at a place where the people who are in the social and political class closest to the people who actually did most of this work, those foot soldiers, I want to have an archive at a place where they go to school. So she made sure there's an archive at Trenholm State. And in that archive at Trenholm State, among other things, are 40,000 plus documents from the personal collection of Rufus Lewis, Coach Lewis, who I mentioned as we see them at the Interpretive Center here in Montgomery. But all of this is about really reinforcing rituals of community, rituals of remembrance, rituals of recognition, rituals of reinforcing our determination to live in our full humanity, as Carter G. Woodson would say. To live life more abundantly is the direct quote from Carter Woodson. So we left Johnny Carr's house and then went down a side street and stopped in front of a lot. There's nothing there in terms of a built environment, just grass. And there's a historical marker, two-sided historical marker. We got out. On one side of the marker is the description of what used to be in that lot. Again, in the shadow of Alabama State University, this is where the Hale Infirmary was. The Hale Infirmary was a black hospital established as part of something called the Black Hospital Movement. It's a book been written on the Black Hospital Movement, in fact. It was founded by a brother named Cornelius Nathaniel Dorset. He's a graduate of Hampton University, and at one time he was Booker T. Washington's personal physician. And Washington encouraged him to move to Montgomery and start this hospital for black folk. And he opened the Hale Infirmary in 1890. So that's on one side of the markers, like I said, part of the Black Hospital movement. Black people trying to start hospitals in this country. Did they want to be segregated? No. Did they want health care? Yeah. Did they want health care more than the integrated or segregated institutions? Yeah. I want health care. I don't give a damn where it comes from, I needed so Black physicians that were beginning to emerge then. In fact, Dr. Dorset was one of the first Black, if not the first Black physician in the state of Alabama. So we got out, and Dr. Kelsey, Reba Kelsey, of course, is a physician when I school of medicine. I said, let me take your picture in front of this sign. Because part of Black Hospital movement, you never know. You drop that in a PowerPoint somewhere, you give a presentation. People need to know about the Black Hospital movement. Very important in the 1920s, 30s, 40s. There was an organization that was started for Black hospitals. It didn't survive past the 1940s. But, and then she said, oh, no, it's something on the other side. So you look on the other side. And the other side of the historical marker tells the story of what happened on September the 30th, 1919, on the site of the Hale Infirmary, in the Hale Infirmary. And that was the lynching of Willie Temple. Willie Temple was a brother who had been arrested, and they gave him treatment at the Black hospital, Hale Infirmary. And these punk ass white boys busted past security, went upstairs, and killed him in the infirmary. Now, the building is not there. It's just grass. It's right behind where the Carr's house is. But there is a historical marker. Up in Montgomery, in Alabama generally, because remember, we were a couple of weeks ago, we were up the road and saw the historical markers there about the Freedom Riders. And when you think about it, Alabama does a pretty good job in terms of historical markers. And I'm going to tie this in a moment. I'll tie it in 10 seconds to voting. People say vote doesn't matter. No, you need to swing with both fists, because you don't know which legislator, which city council person, which person on the historical commission you got appointed because the governor owed a favor to somebody who did some voting and did some political work for them. You don't know how it ends up like that. But I know that because of all that political work, there are places where you can go now where you might just think you passing a empty lot. No, there's a sign there. Let me tell you about what happened there. And there were Black doctors who started a Black hospital. That's all very important, y'all. It's very important. I call those things, and y'all have heard me say this many times before, and so I'll just say it again today to reinforce, call it intellectual crime scenes investigation. And I understand CSI is a kind of harsh term, and that's why I use it, but also I always want to investigate the places where our people were harmed, but not because they were harmed there. I want to see the underlying stories of who we are to each other, because this whole trauma-based creation of African people, this whole trauma-based narrative has to be erased. It has to be taken out, as Charles Houston and them might say, root and branch, and replaced with a governance formation, who we are to each other. And it's interesting because I'm still vibrating after having seen for the first time in person. I read the catalog, but I got a chance finally to sneak down to the National Museum of African American History and Culture this week in DC to catch the Vanguard temporary exhibit in the temporary exhibit hall, the one where they rotate things out every few months at the museum there on the first subfloor. When you come in the museum and take the escalator down, the first floor, you look to the left and there's a temporary exhibit hall. And the Vanguard exhibit is about historically Black colleges. And Clark Atlanta, Florida A&M, Jackson State, Texas Southern, and Tuskegee, their archives worked in collaboration with the museum to create and curate this beautiful exhibit on HBCUs. And so you can stand there and look at the Margaret Walker Center at Jackson State featured. And they brought up that bust, by the way, of Phyllis Wheatley with her finger like this. And the one I first saw the first time was over in the Museum of American History, but that bust is in Mississippi at the Margaret Walker Center. So they brought, because remember, they had the Phyllis Wheatley Poetry Festival there. So if you get to DC, you get to see that bust. And then there are all these famous pictures. You see Roy Lewis's work, where you see Maury Evans and Sonia Sanchez and Alice Walker and all of them with Margaret Walker, and they take this picture, Paula Giddings, and they're in this picture together, these Black women who come together for the first Phyllis Wheatley Poetry Festival. They got Margaret Walker's typewriter, some of her notebooks, because she was an inveterate journaler, all there. And then you go around the corner and you see where, fam, you had a hospital. And it's like, wow, it's just so moving. You see a miniature replica of the Booker T. Washington statue from Tuskegee, which is just so moving. And then just beyond that, on the walls, they've reproduced at the top along the walls reproductions of Hale Woodruff's famous centerpiece mural from Atlanta University. I remember we were down there and I talked about the Trevor Arnett Library, and on the second floor, the great murals of Hale Woodruff. And so you see them. And then on the next wall, you see some of the murals of the great John Biggers at Texas Southern. You're going to stop playing with Black people. You're going to stop lying on our ancestors, or not. You can do what you want. But when you understand that our concept of inclusion, our way of knowing that is grounded in an Africana approach to our common humanity, does not believe in and will not practice exclusion. So, what is badly misinterpreted as this desire to perfect democracy is, in fact, the Africanization of whatever space we find ourselves in. And if that means that we got to force some laws to change as a defense mechanism so that we can live our lives and celebrate in our beauty, then so be it. But ain't nobody trying to perfect America. Anyone who thinks we're trying to perfect America, I would invite you into dialogue with your ancestors and with the rest of us, because you will mistake a statement like we want this to be a more perfect union with the intent to give your humanity over as a sacrifice to that. That's what Derek Bell would call the principle of the involuntary sacrifice. Ain't nobody wanted to do that. So what we wanted to do is a space to live. You know, one of the pictures on the wall in Interpretive Center, in addition to the great Bernard Lafayette, who just made transition, as we've talked about, and JoAnn Bland, of course, you saw the memorial for her there. There were pictures of Nelson Malden, who still walks the earth. Nelson Malden, who Ranger Wells told us, was over at the center recently. What a blessing for this ranger, this white park ranger, to be able to be in a space where these elders still coming and walking the earth. Nelson Malden was a undergraduate student at Alabama State University. And one of the ways that he paid tuition and made a little change on the side was he cut hair. He's a barber while he was in college. And he and his brother opened a barbershop, Malden Brothers Barbershop. He's retired now, but apparently they tell me you can still get your hair cut at that barbershop. And from 1954 to 1960, when Dr. King was living here in Montgomery and preaching right down the street here at Dexter Avenue, now Dexter Avenue King Church, Nelson Malden was his barber. And so I started reading some interviews with Nelson Malden. Nelson Malden said, yeah, the guy came in, I didn't know who he was. He said, I was bigger than he was in terms of, I'm in college, I got some money in my pocket, I'm a barber, people know me. Who is this guy? A new preacher in town? No problem. He said, first time I cut his hair, he was like, that's pretty good. Yeah, you need to speak fluent Ebonics. To come from an Africana perspective in Black folk, in our governance formations, in our cultural meaning making, you get up out of a barber's chair and the barber give you the mirror and you look in the mirror and say, that's pretty good. That's an insult. That's what the elder Nelson Malden said. He said, man, yes, let's see. He said, but he came back. Next time he came back, Malden said, I said to him, well, you back, so that haircut must have been good. He said, it's all right. He said, man, do you want me to mess up your hair? Anyway, they ended up being friends. And he said, those barbershops, like the beauty parlors, these are the space where people could talk freely. And during the Montgomery bus boycott, a lot of the conversations on strategy, a lot of the conversations to relieve tension or to express something that had been felt and seen, a lot of the conversation about logistics, how to get people from one place to another place, from east to west in Montgomery, east where the white people lived, and the people who worked in their houses had to get there to do the carpools and the reduced rate black taxi service, all that. A lot of conversations were held in places like Nelson Malden's barbershop, Balden's barbershop. That's a governance space, but you have to go to that space. Sure, you can look it up online. Sure, you can even probably at some point get a virtual reality. And if you keep messing around with mad scientists, imaginary mad scientists, bizarro Tony Starks, like Alex Karp or Peter Thiel or Elon Musk or the rest of these mad scientists, the Ellisons, then maybe one day you can stick a damn, I don't know, contact lens in your face and imagine you're in the barbershop. That's all great for you. But ain't nothing, as Tammy and Marvin say, like the real thing. You got to go to the space. And as I sit here and as I think about because this ain't new to me. What's new, relatively speaking, although in a minute it's going to be 6 years, huh, Prof, is being able to be in a space where I can be one of the people who is helping people know where this stuff is and what it means. That's the newish part. What ain't new is going to these places, because I will go everywhere if I can, and have always been about, let's just go and sit in the space and just be quiet. Because you know what we did yesterday too. I started to lead with this video. Maybe we do it next week. We walked down to the riverfront. Yes. And the black people were getting on the boat to go up and down Alabama River. And so we went down to the river walk to see the site of the Montgomery Brawl. And what did we see? Leaning against the rail right beyond where the boat is. Yes, that's right. There is a white folding chair that apparently these people must keep out there, because they know why the people coming down there to see. So we got some video of the white folding chair. Why? Come on, man. Just very simple. And I thought about that white folding chair I saw at Rickwood Field in Birmingham 2 weeks ago. I'm like, boy, you gotta love our people. Our people are brilliant. So let me just say a few more things, and then we'll wind up for today. As I said, the Fred Gray Symposium, we talked about this extensively last year. So if you go to the session where we talked about the inaugural Fred Gray Symposium, you'll get the biography of Fred David Gray, who is just a purebred legend, and for any number of reasons, just truly remarkable. And so on Thursday night, there was an opening ceremony. As I said, Cal Walker gave some remarks, and then David and Dr. Randy Lowry, who was the president emeritus at Lipscomb University, had a lot of cousins who went to Lipscomb. David Lipscomb's, it's a Church of Christ school in Nashville, Tennessee. Fred David Gray, Church of Christ. He went to Nashville Christian Institute, along with a lot of my first cousins, and also a young man named Arthur Lee Smith, who was a little younger, a lot younger than Fred Gray. But you don't know his name as Arthur Lee Smith Jr. You know him as Malefi Asante. I also grew up Church of Christ. My man Akinyele Umoja and Baba AK passed on the greetings to Baba Fred David Gray, because as I told people where I was going, Baba AK was like, "Oh yeah, man, stayed at my house." In the Church of Christ community, very tight, and so Baba AK, I made sure I did that. But so we have this governance tradition is so very, very important. And David Lowry is president of David Lipscomb, and he, president emeritus, he and Dr. Fleer, ministers. These guys are ministers, man. Like Fred David Gray is a minister. Fred Gray is a minister. And so, they're raising money. And I encourage people, I really do encourage people to support the Fred Gray Institute for Human and Civil Rights and the Tuskegee History Center. Because Fred Gray is, to quote the title of this book, Fred Gray writes an introduction on this book on Tuskegee Institute High School. He said, I am one of the ones who stayed. He absolutely did. Case Western Reserve, another sponsor of the Fred Gray Institute, is in Cleveland, where he went to law school after JoAnn Robinson encouraged him to go to law school when he was an undergrad at Alabama State. Fred Gray came back to Alabama. He could have stayed, as we talked about when we were at Case Western last year. He could have stayed in Cleveland. The easiest thing in the world for a Negro to do, or anyone who is in a group that's in a society that oppresses them based on who they are, the easiest thing for you to do, if you can, is to navigate your way out of the direct oppression and cut out a little room to operate. You know what I'm saying? And the hardest thing to do is to be in the place with the rest of your people who are suffering. But in some ways, that's the easiest place to do. Y'all know the South of the United States always has a pull on me. It will forever have a pull on me. Not just because I was born and raised in the South, not just because my mother is from Alabama and my dad from Tennessee. No, because I am an African. And if you want to go to a place where you will encounter serial Africanisms that are deeply familiar to you, where people will say, yes, sir, no, sir, yes, ma'am, no, ma'am. I'm talking about, I don't care. We see that as Africans everywhere. You come to the U.S. South. Then you can go to South Side Chicago, to West Side Chicago. You can go to Harlem or Brooklyn. You can go to Detroit, East Side. You can go to Philly, North Philly, West Philly, South Philly. You can do that. And you'll see it too. But here in the South, there is less of a improvisational adaptation to those other places. It's closer to being unfiltered here because it's moved the least from the time we get off the boats. And so there's that. And it's very important to understand that. So the conversation on Thursday night was relatively short. It was good to have some conversation. And it was a brother named Alvin Garrett who did a great job singing. He was just beautiful, beautiful, beautiful renditions. I'll put it that way. And but the highlight of the night after the kind of introductory rituals was a keynote speech given by the good brother Brian Fair. Brian Fair is the head of the Southern Poverty Law Center. I encourage you all to look up the good brother Brian Fair. He's the current president. He gave a talk called "Bending the Arc: The Resistance Spirit, Past and Present," and it was a kind of a tour de force. He was comprehensive reading of where we are in terms of the society, U.S. society, and what's going on in courts. But most importantly, it was a reminder as he took his text, so to speak, as the ministers would say, from Martin King saying the arc of the universe is long, but it bends toward justice. And he reminded us, Brian Fair, that we bend the arc. This isn't left to happenstance or cosmic certainty, although as Africans, we understand in terms of ways of knowing that certain things are going to happen regardless of whether we as individuals or even communities act on them or not. But in terms of the arc of how we shape this, what we would call social structure in Africana Studies rendering, we bend that arc. We decide when enough of us decide how this goes. And that's something to always remember. And then there was a response to him, our good sister, Dr. Angela Sims, who is at the Colgate Rochester Crozier Divinity School. She moderated a conversation with Trent Ogilvie and Sophia Lynn Lakin. Sophia Lynn Lakin is at the ACLU. She's the director of the Voting Rights Project at the American Civil Liberties Union. And then yesterday, after that Thursday night, actually, we were together on the panel, which I'll talk about, and then as we wrap up for today. And Trent Ogilvie is he is at the Columbia Peace and Justice Initiative. So these are people who are out there swinging with both fists. And it was very important, even in the conversation that they were having, to reflect on what can be done. Because people think, well, I can't do anything. Everybody can do something. Carol Bland would say that. I mean, not Carol Bland. JoAnn Bland would say that. In fact, Ms. Bland would describe it as saying that, society's a big jigsaw puzzle. And if your piece is missing, the picture isn't complete because you're the most important piece. The missing piece, you got to find that missing piece. We can all do something. And, yesterday, when, I was happy to be on an afternoon panel, there was a lot of real conversation. In fact, they launched something yesterday morning called the Deborah Gray Scholars Program. The recent ancestor, Deborah Gray. I think her book, I'm trying to remember the name of her, but Fred Gray's oldest child, Deborah Gray. Her book, I think it's called Daughter of the Movement. Yeah, I mean, in fact, I bought a copy when she was in town. When her father got the medal from Joe Biden, and they had the medal on display yesterday. So you see the medal there. You see President of the United States putting this medal around Fred Gray's neck. But they started something called the Deborah Gray Scholars Program to develop that next generation of young people. She was the managing director as well of the Tuskegee History Center, Deborah Gray. And if you want to know more about it, let me show you here. It's the Deborah Gray Scholars Program. And you see the deadlines there. If you want to apply, I'm gonna hold that there. Y'all can pause it later after for the recording so you can see what to do to get there. I'll let this scroll up a little bit. Ashley Upkins, who is the president of the National Bar Association. It's interesting. Black folk, we talked about this before. Black quote unquote professionals, the doctors, the dentists, the lawyers. It's interesting how we put national in the title of our professional organizations. For the short time that it existed in the Black hospital movement, the National Hospital Association, they say Black people, Black professionals seem to use national as a euphemism or as a correlate or as a word that means Black. I like that. So people say, oh yeah, well, our nation, our country. Shut up. or keep talking. It don't matter. Keep talking. But ask yourself this question. When the white people put together the American Medical Association, the American Bar Association, they talk about American. We say national. This is what national means, American. Not in my mind. Not in my mind. And why do y'all say national? Because Americans taken. Why do they say the American Negro? Why do they say the American Negro Bar Association, the American Negro Medical Association? I like national. Why? Because we are a nation. But as Amiri Baraka or David Walker will remind us, we are a nation, or Martin Delaney will remind us, right, Larry Crow, right, Kwaku, we are a nation. In a nation, they would say, Huey Newton, I would say we are a nation in a state, because this state ain't a nation. The United States is not a nation. Anybody who thinks it is, just keep reading and pay attention. So, yeah, they launched that yesterday morning, and then there were several rounds of panels. There were 4 convenings. Panel 1, Voting Rights, History, and Principles. Jeffrey Baker was the moderator there. He's a professor at the University of Alabama School of Law. We got a chance to talk after things were over yesterday afternoon. I think he's actually supposed to be leading a tour today of some of the sites in Montgomery. And it was a good conversation as well. And I'll talk a little bit about some of what some of the commentators had to say as I folded in my remarks, particularly Dean Takagi, Daniel Takagi, who was the dean at the University of Wisconsin School of Law. I'm going to talk about him in a moment. The second panel was on voting rights. That was the one that I was on. My good sister, Aisha Bell Hardaway, brilliant scholar at Case Western University. We met years ago. We were in Newark for the State of the Black World Conference. Ron Daniels and them had put it together in Newark, and we shared some time together in that one. So we were a lot younger then, but she's really a remarkable scholar, dealing particularly with policing and how we push back against this question of how we have been framed and discussed. She was telling us about a very interesting project she's in the middle of working on now. But she had been the one who had asked me to come and participate on this particular panel with the good brother Atiba Ellis, her colleague at Case Western, professor of constitutional law. As I mentioned, Sophia Lynn Larkin from the ACLU, she came back and was on this panel with us. And a good young sister who I had not met in person, but of course she is part of the force that is Black Voters Matter. So Natasha Brown, of course, Cliff and April Albright, who I hope y'all got a chance to see their State of Our Union address a few weeks ago down at the Black Star Network with the good brother Roland Martin. But so I did not know D. I did not know Deanna D. Reed, proud graduate of Miles College in Birmingham, Alabama, who is the state director or state coordinator for Black Voters Matter, State of Alabama coordinator, but she is truly a force. Just a beautiful spirit, brilliant. And she was talking about, remember, the Selma Bridge crossing was last week in Selma, Alabama, the Selma Jubilee. Shout out to Hank and Rose Sanders, good sister, Fire Rose Teray, crack lawyers, stalwart lawyers who live in Selma and who, out of their mind, came the Selma Bridge Jubilee crossing. But she was talking about, I think I mentioned this on the air when we were on Sirius, and she was talking about yesterday, they had a warrant clinic. And they do warrant clinics all around. They come into communities. They have these clinics with local attorneys and political folk and organizers. They never do it in the courthouses or anywhere else because people got anxiety about being around there. But a warrant clinic means, I understand we got to get involved and register to vote and all that, but I got this stuff on my record that I need to get cleaned up. It's a little ticky-tack stuff, but I couldn't get my license renewed as a result, or I owe this money as a result, and I'm worried about that. Okay, they hold warrant clinics. And they bring people together to help get your record straight, get your record clean, get something dismissed, get something moved out of your. That's the kind of tangible work that she does. So I was just glad to be there with them. And thinking about that, and this is where I'll kind of begin to turn to a close now. Going to that Montgomery Interpretive Center, I talked about sitting there in that Never Lose Sight of Freedom film. We went into, like, when you said, if you go back, if you missed it, if you came on after we started, it was about 4 minutes I took inside the Interpretive Center, and they got this one hall with these mannequins in there, which is like, this is very interesting. They got, whoever did the Martin Luther King mannequin was Chef's Kiss. And thank you, Prof. Yeah, Prof. He usually does that. She'll play it at the end. Thank you, Prof, for playing at the end of our time together today. And whoever did that, Yeah, the Belafonte, the Martin Luther King, that's as close as I've seen to the King and a mannequin. I'm like, okay. Next to him, see, I thought it was Amelia Boynton Robinson, but John Wells said might have been Coretta. I'm like, okay, but it was representative of a lot of convenings that took place here. And in fact, in the in the bookstore there, we picked up copies of this book called Selma is Now. These are photographs by a white photographer whose nickname was Spider. Very interesting. Spider Martin. And this is a famous picture. You see John Lewis there with Hosea Williams, and JoAnn Bland is in this line. They're gonna get beat up. It's just terrible. This is the guy, Spider. I guess they call him Spider because he up in the trees. You see him in the video that they play, Never Lose Sight of Freedom, which is in that little theater. I said, oh, it's another theater. And the lights came up. That's where they play this on a loop. And John started it for us. But, here's Martin and Coretta King. He's got to love this man, our people. Then they kill this man, and this sister got to go through the rest of her life. I forgive nothing. You understand? Forgive and forget. No, don't forgive. Don't forget. Anyway, you should forgive. Whatever. Would you forgive? It was your mama? It's like damn Magic City telling me, oh, they canceled Magic City, having Magic City night at Atlanta Hawks. Okay, so the strip club is cool. Yeah, we just expressing ourselves. It's bodily autonomy. Okay, can your mama strip at the club? Can your sister? Can your daughter? Yeah. If she can, then no problem. You go to the strip club. And I know people feel, some kind of way about bodily autonomy. I think we have to have a society where if you want to take off your clothes, fine. But if you don't want to take off your clothes, fine. We act like people aspired to that. No, the social structure created a condition that had people's aspirations shaped to their image of who they are to other people. That's a social structure conversation. But, oh, wait, here we go.
Mm.
What is that?
No, I'm just co-signing.
Okay, yeah. I mean, it's like people think, oh, yeah, I chose this. Did you? Or did the society choose your self image for you? Don't do that. Or do it. We're going to help you. But wait, I can't find it. Oh, wow. Because they have all these quotes in here that Spider has that I don't know. Anyway, there's a line in here. He asked Dr. King, why Alabama? Oh, here it is. Look at this. Now see, now I'm gonna read it right quick. He says, Dr. King told me that the reason they were in Alabama is because Alabama has the best theater. He said George Wallace defeated himself. Bull Connor, Sheriff Jim Clark, and Al Lingo, they all fell into the plan. Dr. King said we could march and protest in Chicago, nobody would care. But in Alabama, I agree. Alabama got the best theater. I don't know, Mississippi might want to put up a word, but I'm telling you right now, Alabama still got the best theater. I am convinced that as we continue to think and work together and have real deep conversations with ourselves, that the things that will be revealed will make our movement out of them irreversible. The minute we see University of Alabama football games as an extension of the plantation will be the day that we start going to the University of Alabama to play football. Because the absurdity will be evident. I don't understand. Listen, I love University of South Carolina women's basketball team. Shout out to Dawn Staley, Philly's best. But I swear to God, every time those sisters run them down that field and score, and they do a cut shot to the cheerleaders, and I don't see no black cheerleaders, and don't tell me, oh, it's one or two, yeah, but somehow they never appear in the frame. I'm sure there are one or two Negroes, but come on, y'all. And then you see the people screaming in the stands, and I'm like, except for the family members and two or three other Negroes, I'm like, these are the same people who say, yeah, let's go vote for Trump. The hell out of here. Anyway, sitting there in the Never Lose Sight of Freedom film. It's a 10-minute film. But a lot of these same images in this Selma Is Now book. We sitting there, and I looked at Reeve and I said, in a minute, we're going to see Baba Wukasa. We're going to see Willie Ricks. And damned if, almost as soon as I said it, here come Willie Ricks, the great Pan-Africanist, who, of course, is in Atlanta. He and his partner, the great Willie Ricks, Mukasa Dada. as they called him back in the 80s, the African man who would come on the campus of Clark Atlanta University and keep things going. Just a beautiful, fist in the air, black power. The man who has more, or at least as much or more to do with the framing of black power that comes out of Stokely Carmichael's mouth in the summer of 1946, of course, 64, that comes out of his mouth as anything else was Mukasa Dada, organizing, who greets everybody, hello, African. And here he is, Willie Ricks, standing next to these white students who have come from the North, who are down here in Montgomery, confronting this terror, who are confronting the terror across the South, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia. And here's Mukasa Ricks. And not only is he in one picture, he is in the next picture. And then they skip, and here's another picture. And here he's confronting these state troopers saying, he said, I'm from Tennessee, I'm here in Alabama, and will you get out of our way? Or will you let me pass? And he looked the exact same. The photographs where he's talking, this is the same way he talked to this day with his dashiki on, except he's there with a shirt and tie, or he has some overalls. He's in all these pictures. And you think about that in the context of what it means to who we are to each other. And this is an integrated group. There's an elderly white woman now who was young at that time, who's talking about while she was there, white dudes. She's got him off the ground. He got blood coming out of his forehead, and they trying to get past this place where the police have cornered them. And Spider is taking these pictures, and she looking at him. And once she realizes he's taking a picture, she's yelling, "Look what they did to him! Look what they did to him!" And these are white kids. And who's right there with them? Willie Ricks, Mukasa Dada, the Pan-Africanist. So local struggle is enforcing, or rather reinforcing, informing another undervoiced narrative. African people in our full humanity, not this piecemeal utilitarian function. Oh, they were fighting for America. Y'all stop lying on our ancestors. You stop lying on our elders. They were fighting out of African foundations for our common humanity, and they won. And they won every moment. They won in the moment of that struggle, and they won in the aftermath. Because lives that are transformed as a result of us being who we are to each other in public, not who you think we are. That is the challenge for African people. It's a challenge for all human beings, but it's certainly a challenge for us in this racist ass society, is to say the thing that's in our heart, at our mouths, in front of people. We pick the times when we say them. It could be a barbershop or a beauty parlor during a bus boycott. But there will be moments when we have to be fully ourselves in public. And I'm sorry, quite frankly, too many of these Negroes who are race translators, who are in documentaries saying things that when the cameras go down, they go and brush their teeth and then say to each other, I wish I hadn't had to say that, but they wouldn't have put me in the documentary if I hadn't said it. You don't believe that. As Louis Farrakhan told Mike Wallace, you should be quiet, but it's okay. So, I want to talk about, how legal struggle in this country often shapes how we think about ourselves in terms of our common humanity. So what I said, let me propose a thought exercise, an imperfect thought exercise. I said, what if we had a case? And this goes back to Dean Takaji, as I mentioned, from University of Wisconsin, who had said earlier in the day, he quoted Martin Luther King, who said, I fear that I'm integrating my people into a burning house. But Dean Takaji didn't say, I fear I'm integrating my people into a burning house. He said, then Takaji said, Martin Luther King said that I fear we are integrating into a burning house. Now, y'all know what my question was. We sit in the battle. Who is we? But I understand it in a broad sense that we is everybody. Everybody living in the United States, everybody living in this modern world system is living in a burning house. And right now, you got a certified idiot who was an idiot before his brain leaked out of his ear with the nuclear launch codes. And yet, people are waiting with bated breath to see whether or not sinners will win an Academy Award. My breath's not bated. I don't care. If they win, fine. If they don't win, fine. But what I have is no investment in some people's statues. But hey, guess what? And there'll be people who watch this all week, and you'll know whether it happened or not. Just know that I don't care. So if your heart is broken, you broke your heart. You let other people's opinion of you shape how you view yourself, at least in that regard. But I'm saying, that's irrelevant right now. At least in the context of you got a whole ass madman sitting in Israel trying to wage war on the whole world. He done drug your tax dollars into it. And on this side of the water, you got a fool with his finger on the nuclear line. And so that's all So in that sense, we are all in the burning house. But Dr. King said, I fear I integrate my people. That's what Harry Belafonte said, Martin King said. I'm going to trust Martin King. So anyway, in that context, let's say we're in the middle of a case, a law case. This is the thought exercise I proposed yesterday. Common humanity versus exclusion. That's the title for today. Common humanity versus exclusion. Let's say that's the case before us. The jury, who's the jury in this case? The jury is everybody, all human beings. The prosecutors, those are our best exemplars. What does that mean? That's the Fred Grays. That's the JoAnn Blands and the Bernard Lafayettes. That's the Coretta Scott Kings and the Nat King Coles and the Ralph David Abernathys. The Johnny Carrs. So the prosecutors are the ones who have stood the tallest in the space. The Kwame Nkrumahs and these are the ones who have stood in the space. The Patrice Lumumbas. These are the ones who have stood in the space. Monday night in office hours, the question was raised about gender in Born in Blackness. And, my response was, well, there's not a lot in the archive to single out individuals of African descent, particularly women, when you start talking about this question of who did what to African people. So if you want to look for the names of women who trafficked African people, women of African descent, I said there are names like Nzinga, she in the jury. Nzinga from 16th century Congo, all Africans in the jury. You can go back to Kemet, ancient Egypt, to find Hatshepsut, and the Candaces in Ethiopia, they in the jury. In space, you have a lot of people in the jury. So is Wangari Maathai, she in the jury. A lot of people in the jury. So you got the jury. I'm sorry, not she's in the jury too, but the prosecutors are our best exemplars. Those are the ones who are going to call a thing, and we getting ready to punish y'all for what you've done. So who is the defendant? If the jury is all of us, if the prosecutors are the best Africans who have brought this stuff to bear and put it in your face, then the defendant has to be the white nationalists. And they pleaded guilty to all the charges. What's the charge? Racism, white supremacy, capitalism, all this stuff, oppressing people. That's the defendant. Have they said not guilty? No, they haven't. Bozo was a proud white nationalist. So is Marco Rubio, who we thought was Cuban, but apparently is from Spain and Italy, as he told the white people in Munich a few weeks ago. You didn't embrace the charge of white supremacy, too. Senator Eric Schmidt, that racist from Missouri, saying that if everybody's in it, nobody's in it. Why? America's not for them, America's for us. Okay, no problem. I love it. You're pleading guilty, my friend, you nasty piece of work, Russell Vogt, you little white nationalist. You think that guy's a numbers cruncher. He is. You think he's a policy wonk. He is. But at heart, he is a religious zealot. He's not a Christian. He's a religious zealot. He's a white nationalist. Nasty piece of work. Elon Musk, Steve Bannon, Stephen Miller, doggone Christy Nolan. You name all of you Pete Hegseth, they're white nationalists. Samuel Alito, white nationalists. They're white nationalists. And white nationalism isn't a skin color. It's an ideology, because you got a white nationalist named Clarence Thomas that's a whole ass manservant to white nationalism. But they have pled guilty. If the charge from the prosecutors is you're oppressive and you're basing it on race, and even if you're not, you're a billionaire like Bill Ackman or some of these crazy people like Alex Karp, whose mother is black, but who would say, I'm whatever people say. Okay, fine. You didn't embrace white nationalism and you pled guilty to it. So if you pled guilty to it now, but guess what? If you pled guilty, you know why you pled guilty in part? Because you want to avoid a jury trial. You don't want to say not guilty and then have to go to trial. Why? Because if you go to trial, you got to see the jury. And who's in the jury? We in the jury. You want to avoid us at all points. So what did you do? You want to plead out. You want to plead out. Now, if you've seen a cop procedural show, you can follow me. You don't need to be a lawyer. You don't be a legal scholar to follow this analogy, right? Imperfect though it is. So they are attempting desperately to avoid a jury trial. That's one of the reasons they plead to their guilt. But what is the jury trial? I don't think they can avoid the jury trial. Why? Because even though they're attempting to plead, the prosecutors want to proceed. Maybe they don't accept the plea. Now we're going to trial. So then, if you're going to trial, what will the defense attorneys try to do? They're going to try to pick the jury. They're going to do it by peremptory strikes, meaning what? We're going to get rid of you for no reason at all other than we just want to get rid of you. That's what they call a peremptory strike. in jury selection. But then you only get a limited number of those. What does that mean? Okay, I'm going to try desperately to get rid of people in the jury. And how do you do that in a social structure that relies on electoral politics? You try to stop them from voting. The vote in this metaphor is participation in the jury. So in order for them not to judge us, we got to get rid of the jurors. And to get rid of the jurors, we're going to have an arbitrary getting rid of them. We'll do that by having social media, for example, weaponize ignorance with tangibles, or tweeting out or putting on TikTok or Instagram or YouTube foolishness like both parties are the same. It ain't no difference with, and then just weaponizing that shit. Okay, that's one way. That's peremptory strikes. Then you got something called voir dire, where you ask the jurors questions, potential jurors questions, and based on their answers, you get the judge to disqualify them. Oh, jury number 50 is not good because they said this to the answer. Or jury number 300 is not good because they said, okay, that's what you call voter suppression. That's the SAVE Act. That's the MEGA Act. That's the photo ID, but you got to have the name on your birth certificate match the record as you come. And then I got married, my name changed. Well, too bad. Give me another one. Oh, everybody can do it. Nah, don't get confused. This is all about voter suppression. That's the voir dire. You're trying to get rid of people off this jury, this big jury that's going to hold these white nationalists to account. But guess what? They still going to be guilty if you can get their jury seated. A true jury reflecting the society. This is our common humanity. Remember, the case is common humanity versus exclusion. Now, here we at the sentencing phase. Let's say they've been convicted. Here's the sentencing phase. The presiding judge over all this in the courtroom is the structural arrangement we have, the state. That's what he was on the Supreme Court, who's going to be hearing oral arguments in birthright citizenship soon in the United States. This is the rule of law, so to speak. And this is what I said yesterday. I said, but even judges have those they answer to. And who are the people that judges answer to above everything else? The people who allow the state to persist in its current arrangement. There was a professor who spoke yesterday. Let me see if I have his name, because I wasn't familiar with. Oh yeah, Jonathan Empton. He's at Case Western, professor emeritus. Professor Empton quoted the Alexander versus State Conference of the NAACP case, which said, this is out of South Carolina, where the Supreme Court says you have to presume good faith in the legislators who are drawing these gerrymandered lines. Why in the hell would I presume good faith from racists? They've been racist the whole time. Yeah, they let Jesse Jackson lay in state, but let's be very clear. In terms of voter suppression, in terms of all these laws that are being passed, particularly throughout places like the South, these are white nationalists, the hillbilly horde, as I call them, and these legislators, these state legislators, the hillbilly horde, the so-called supermajorities, because Negroes will not and others won't bother to register and go exercise their franchise at the booth. And for those of you who say that I'm a shill for the Democrats, your ears don't work. Clean out the wax. But you got to get involved to displace and break the back of these white nationalist supermajorities in the South. But Professor Empton quoted this recent Supreme Court case, Alexander case, out of South Carolina, because the court says, well, you got to presume that when they drew these lines, they were acting in good faith. No, I don't presume that. So who is the force that sits atop the judge? That's the people collectively who allow this process to persist in its current arrangement until we get involved and don't. I think Dean, I said to Dean Takaji as he was sitting there, I said, I think Dean Takaji, that's what we mean by the rule of law. We say, well, there's a law and there's a rule of law. And there have been a lot of victories won. I'm not saying that this thing doesn't balance in some ways, but be quite frank, you bend the arc, as we heard Brian Fair Thursday night, you bend the arc through collective action. You don't wait for the arc to bend itself. So what does that mean for us as I begin to kind of wind this up? When the defendant violates the terms of the plea, let's say that they've been convicted, we're at the sentencing phase. And at the sentencing phase, the prosecutors finally agree, okay, we'll work something out between us and the prosecutor. Actually, that's not how it works. If you're going to trial and you got a judgment, that is what it is. So let's say that they got at the sentencing phase, there's going to be maybe before the trial, before the jury goes out. That's what we did. And I'm working out the metaphor. It's an imperfect metaphor, but I think I got to work down now. So it's in the trial. You're looking at this. You couldn't get the jury you wanted. The jury's going to be us now for real. And you're trying to, okay, well, you know what? Can we talk? Now, how many times y'all seen this on TV? Can we talk? Now, the defendant's talking to the prosecutor, because the prosecutor is our people. This is the Kings and the Rosa Parkses and the Claudette Colvins and all them people. Yeah, okay, yeah, we can talk. Okay. And then the prosecutor says, well, I think we've reached a plea. We've reached a deal. Judge said, what's the deal? Defendant says, I agree to ease up on these people. I think this is basically the history of the civil rights movement. Our continued consent to be governed, those of us who have been oppressed systematically because of who we are, well, we will continue to participate in this rotten ass system in exchange for you restraining the worst impulses of the system. So you can't just be shooting us in the street. I know we're going to get screwed for a bank loan, but you got to put some rules in place so we don't get screwed all the time. I mean, these are the incremental things, which are victories. But don't mistake them for complete concessions. These white nationalists ain't never going to concede. You have to break their political backs. You have to render them politically inert. You understand? But the concessions are so they can maintain some nominal system. And Bozo has lost his mind at this point. We ain't even going to talk to them. We just going to bomb people. Why? Because I can. And that's what's going to lead to the end of it. And this is where I'm going with this as I begin to land this plane. What happens when they violate the terms of the plea? So that's what's going on now in Iraq and Iran. Well, I say Iraq, although Iraq got bombed too this week. Iran, that's what's happening in Venezuela. That's what they're going to try to do in Cuba. That's what they're trying to do in Columbus, Georgia. That's what they're trying to do all over the world, white nationalists. They violating the terms of the plea. What's the plea? We're going to ease up on y'all a little bit in exchange for y'all continuing to kind of pump some life into this idea that we need a system. We need a rule of law. Well, guess what? They violated even that now. They've been working on it for 80 years in the United States of America, and certainly after the Voting Rights Act of 1965, as we wait for the voting rights case to be decided. We talked about that extensively. I don't want to go into it now. But guess what? When you violate the terms of that plea, you have breached a binding contract with the state. You breached the contract with the larger concept of the people. And guess what that allows the prosecutor to do? Guess what that allows our best exemplars, which now include people like, Malcolm X and Amiri and Amina Baraka. Guess what that lets our prosecutors do, which means those of us who are very clear-eyed about what's at stake and what we must do, that allows us to void the deal. Now we're going to reinstate the original, more serious charge, which means we renegotiate. This is what we have to do in terms of this world system and in terms of the United States of America. We got to renegotiate the terms of the polity because you violated the deal. Tear it up and rewrite something else. And we're seeking maximum penalties at this point. What those maximum penalties are, we have to determine collectively. Because what's really on trial here is the aspirational concept of a society that indeed includes all of us, not just the United States society. And so what I did yesterday was talk as well about the moments when that possibility is the greatest, has been the greatest in the history of the United States. Reconstruction, of course, the 13th Amendment to the Constitution, which I think we need to really review and revisit. I was talking with a good brother, Tim Lovelace, Professor Lovelace at Duke University School of Law for a few minutes yesterday. I'm looking forward to continue to talk with him. He's a scholar of constitutional law. And I was asking him, I said, why don't we use the 13th Amendment more? And of course, then he was talking about the civil rights cases of the 1880s, of course. And he said Thurgood Marshall and them tried in the 1950s. All stuff I knew, but it was good to hear it from another scholar who is teaching this stuff consistently and thinking about this, because I think we have to revisit the 13th Amendment. I think the flaw in why we don't deal with it is because we haven't accepted the challenge in U.S. society to flesh out what it means to eliminate rights and persons. So when you say a badge of servitude, and in the case of the civil rights cases, they're saying, segregated cars are badges of servitude. I'm going to tell you what's a badge of servitude, too. A badge of servitude in this society is to have an education that would tell you that somehow your history started in slavery. That's a badge of servitude. And I'm saying the 13th Amendment can be revisited. I'm saying the whole country's on trial. And if you don't want to revisit the 13th Amendment, fine. But you can read the plain language of the 13th Amendment any kind of way you want to. What we call the rule of law is too often judge-made law, interpreting it, and the interpreters are white nationalists. Get some different judges on the bench and you get a different opinion. Did y'all see this week? Ketanji Jackson and Brett Beer Kavanaugh were at the same place, the federal court in D.C., talking to a room full of judges and lawyers because they have these rituals. It was a lecture series in honor of one of the judges who served on that bench, and they both served on that same bench. And they got into it without naming each other around the question of the shadow docket, the thing the white nationalists are now using to get around having to make permanent decisions at the Supreme Court. So you don't like something that happened to you at the district court. Bozo and his crew appeal immediately to the Supreme Court to stop the enjoining of the illegal law they put in place. So I'm gonna make a law saying no cats can come in here. Well, that's unconstitutional. Okay, so the judge of the district court says, I am not allowing you to put that law into place. So then what happens? They then appeal to the Supreme Court and say, hey, until you decide on the law on cats, we want you to stop the court beneath you from enjoining the law from going into place. And the Supreme Court is like, okay. Ketanji Brown Jackson tore into that booty this week on that subject, and Kavanaugh was like, "Oh, we don't like making these decisions. You are a liar. You lying like you lied about them parties at Yale with Christine Blasey Ford there. You lied about that, and you lying about this. You love it because you can count. You got at least 5 and a possible 6, and you running a Boston on us." And Ketanji Brown Jackson ain't having it. It was extremely rare to see that kind of thing. But the 13th Amendment, as she talks about the 13th Amendment, she talks about the original intent of the 14th Amendment, she's going back to the legislative record. And I'm saying you can redo all that. I think we need to look at the 13th Amendment. What does it mean to have rights in persons? And how has that not been eliminated in the United States? The 14th Amendment. So the 13th Amendment is the challenge to rethink the entire polity. Because nobody ever asked us whether we wanted to be citizens. Read the work of Amari Obadeli and his brother, Gaidi Obadeli, the so-called three Republican in Africa. The idea is the 14th Amendment is really in the United States the promise of inclusion in the top tier of humanity. What does that mean? Very simple. Citizenship is a problem. Here's the flaw in the 14th Amendment. We accept the logic of the state as the price for protection from the ultimate goal. What should the ultimate goal be? Living in our common humanity, regardless of whether where you came out of your mother's womb, anywhere in the world. But no, the 14th Amendment creates a standard that is not in the original United States of America Constitution, which is the concept of citizenship writ into a document. This is what it means to be a citizen, a birthright citizen. Although equal protection under the law and due process of the law applies to everyone. That's in the plain language of the 14th Amendment. We'll see what these fools do with it this year, with this birthright citizenship case, but it's there. But what if the problem, and I think the problem, what if the problem is citizenship itself? Brian Fair, in his lecture on Thursday night, talked about this question of culture. When Tocqueville in Democracy in America said, there are 2 groups in this country that I'm observing from France that pose a challenge. He said the indigenous people, the Indians, they live apart. They got their own culture. They do this, and this is early, it's 18th century. He said, but these Negroes, they are intertwined. Their lives are intertwined with yours in a different way, and you got to resolve that. I'm saying, nah, Chief, because when you intertwine the lives of Africans and our governance formations in a social structure that is baked in racism, including the Electoral College, which I described yesterday as an Atiba kind of built on that and kind of extended it, quite frankly. A lot of people had said it, but I just kind of put it in a shorthand. The Electoral College is the original racial gerrymandering. That is the permanent racial gerrymandering. It's got to go. And Atiba said that. He said, hey, man, it's got to go. The church has got to be abolished. Why? Because this is the thing that traps everybody. You talk about gerrymandering in states, California, Texas, South Carolina, wherever, Maryland. No, the gerrymander was the Electoral College. You baked into this a white supremacy. So anyway, all that having been said, the 14th Amendment creates the notion that citizenship is the top tier of humanity. And if you're not a citizen, you get a second-class permanent humanity. I say we need to reject that concept. How we reject it is going to be up to us. And when you blend us in with everyone and you bake into it the idea, oh, we're Americans. I'm not a Black American. I'm an American. Okay, you do understand that creates a permanent status of servitude. There's a 13th Amendment argument to be made because you came into this thing as a slave, and nobody has not only ever forgotten that, they've never let you forget, and they treat you like that. That's why you got a concept called affirmative action in the first place. Why? Because you are a second-class citizen. You ain't even at the top tier of citizenship. And beyond that, if you're not a citizen, we're going to put you in a permanent underclass. And guess what? We can never be citizens in this country. Sure, we can say we're citizens, but if you're not treated as a citizen, are you a citizen? I'm saying it's a 13th Amendment argument in addition to a 14th Amendment argument and the 15th Amendment. Finally, this right to vote. That's the device for managing the terminal disease of the nation state as a concept. This country has a terminal disease. Dr. King talked about that. These birth defects people talk about. Yeah, it's there. How do you manage it? Participation allows it to persist as a country as long as it opens up a little bit to give you some space to navigate. When Fannie Lou Hamer in July 1971 gave a speech at the National Women's Political Caucus in Washington, D.C., the founding meeting, and she said, nobody's free till everybody's free. That's a great t-shirt, but what does it mean? She knew what it meant. That means nobody's free till everybody's free, or common humanity versus exclusion. You're excluding people by citizenship. You're excluding people by race. You're excluding people by class and gender. And you want to talk about no, this is our common humanity versus versus exclusion. And when you look at the so-called civil rights or human rights movement, because remember, this is the Fred D. Gray Institute for Human and Civil Rights. The whole point is when you look at that concept, what you're saying is nobody's free till everybody's free. And people don't want everybody to be free. If it means that they're going to have to pay $1 more at the gas station or pay $3 more, get their bananas, they don't want everybody to be free. It's going to cause them a little discomfort. A nation is not a state. And truly renegotiating the terms of any social structure means that we have to protect our ability to contribute to a truly inclusive society. That's very important to understand. Prof. Gigi, who spoke, John Gigi, who's at the University of Alabama, he's the Summerhill Center for the Study of the South. He says, in order to be with the people, you got to be with the people. You can't just look at a lynching. You can't just look at a moment on a bridge. Who were their parents? Who were their families? And we talked a little bit after that. You know why? Because that's what governance means. Who are we to each other? I know it was important to have this confrontation at Selma. I know what it meant to be on the bridge at Edmund Pettus Bridge. I know what all of that means. I also know that that's not who we are to each other. We did this because we had to, not because we had some aspiration to get our asses beat, to be lynched, to be strung up somewhere, to be punched in the stomach, to be spit on. I didn't do that because I love America. I did that to get you off my neck. And until we face that, we're not going to be able to face anything else. Lauren Haddix is at the ACLU. She's an attorney at the ACLU here in Alabama. She made a point. In many ways, race is politics. When the Supreme Court of the United States says that we can't get into political gerrymandering, and then we repeat the stuff like it's law, it's only law because the judge said it is. Switch the law out, switch the judge out, you can change the law. Why? Because absolutely politics is race. Oh no, you can't do that. It's not justiciable because it's a political gerrymandering. It's not about race. The White Nationalist Party are racists. When they gerrymandered to exclude the black people, we talked about the case in Tuskegee with Fred Gray, who argued the case to get rid of the political gerrymander in Tuskegee with Dr. Charles Gamillion versus Lightfoot, where they drew a 28-sided thing that looked like a snake, as TC was talking about yesterday at the Tuskegee History Center, to exclude all the people in Tuskegee. Damn near all of them, almost like 12 black people left, including Tuskegee Institute wasn't even allowed to be in Tuskegee. And at the Supreme Court, the Justice asked Fred Gray, wait, so Tuskegee Institute is not in Tuskegee? He said, that's right, sir. And they tell me at the Tuskegee Historical Center, at the Tuskegee Interpretive Center, they got a recording of the oral argument. So now I got to go to Tuskegee and hear this argument. I got to hear Fred Gray say that to the judge. But we have a chance to change everything, but we can't change it by going through the illusion that this rule of law that exists in this country is somehow handed down by God or these fleeing felons they call founding fathers. This week, the Committee on the Elimination of Racial Discrimination, CERD, for the United Nations, they released a statement. This is what they said, quote, racist hate speech by political leaders, including the President of the United States, combined with intensified immigration crackdowns in the United States, notably near schools, hospitals, and faith-based institutions, has sparked grave human rights violation. And then they go on to name migrants, refugees, asylum seekers, and saying that you call these people criminals or say they're a burden. Well, if you're a white nationalist, yes, you've pleaded to that already. And now we got to break your political back because you violated the terms that said, look, we got some space to operate. Or you won't even give us that. No problem. Let's restore the original terms. Now not only we drop the hammer on y'all, we erase you forever politically. This is a straight out war. This is our common humanity versus exclusion. So how do we solve it? Education. Kudos again to Morehouse Brothers. Case Western had some law students that came down, a couple of other schools. We got to help our young people and help each other think deeply about the relationship of who we are to each other and who we are to other people. That requires starting in the most intimate spaces and fully fleshing those things. The beauty of visiting places and being in conversation. James Turner, in this obituary that Cal brought me from his son, Eric, says the following: a changing perspective is the quest for new values and definitions that are meaningful and appropriate for Black people and which will give substance and significance to their lives. That's what these people were for. The Africanization of the polity in order to have our space and we can live our lives, not some pouring ourselves into a criminal enterprise. We got to engage in rituals of remembrance. There's several of these, and I'm just going to do like 4 of them. First was education. Second is rituals of remembrance. Alabama is key in that. We got to distinguish between a concept where we just see ourselves come into the political universe as being assaulted, and a place like the Montgomery Interpretive Center where we did what we had to do, but it did not define us who we were to each other. This continuum, this constant tension between origin stories, governance formations have to be grounded in who we have been to each other over the space of millennia, not who we were when we dropped into a social structure that had us come in as slaves. Meaning what? That means you're always going to be in a state of involuntary servitude, a conceptual state. This will lead to fatigue. Sophia Lynn Lakin from the ACLU said this the first night. She said, you get tired. You got to restore yourself. You know the best way to restore yourself is to remember that we have always been winning, and that in our community, we have never abandoned our common humanity. Sure, you can take a nap. Sure, you can go on vacation and put your feet in the ocean. Sure, you can have some flowers to tend. That ain't going to restore you. What's going to restore you is community. And even in the middle of struggle, you can have community. What's going to restore you is the laughter in the face of those things. Not, okay, I'm gonna go somewhere and keep some me time. What is me time in the context of a time that there is no time when you're not under assault? It's important to understand that. Alabama for me is a common blend of all of those things. And in many ways, Alabama is to the United States what Philadelphia is to England. In other words, they told the people, oh, we rejecting you. Well, what Alabama is like, we rejecting you. And Alabama has that in microcosm, and it provides an inexhaustible source of energy. Third of the fourth. When we are still and we are expand, and as Cal said the other night, Walker, everybody can do something. Our resistance becomes an act of recentering. Victories come in part because a system attempting to exert control must concede a little bit as the price of maintaining some form of authority. That's important. When Ketanji Onyeka Brown Jackson dissents in a case, she knows she's not winning that day, but she's speaking the truth as she stands in the ground space. And one day that whole arc of the universe can bend, but only if enough of us join her to break the back of the white nationalists like Brett Kavanaugh, Sam Lolito, and Amy Coney Barrett, and Clarence Thomas. Again, not race, ideology. And finally, we have to change the narrative. We have to change the narrative. When a guy like Alex Karp says that reducing the economic power of highly educated voters is what's going to happen with AI, by highly educated voters, he means somebody who's educated. When he's saying that these people who feel like they don't feel supported, yeah, they aren't supported. You're white nationalist. I don't support white nationalism. I'm sorry, sir. And if you don't remember anything, or you're not studying anything, or you're not in community, then I don't support you. As David Walker would say, them people are the same people that kept you oppressed, and they are the devil. Now, I'm not a religious ideologue. I could care less about it. But what I am is someone who is going to step into our common humanity. So that's the conversation we've been having. We'll spend some more time lingering in some places today in Alabama, and next week we'll update where we are. Maybe I'll show you that folding chair we saw on the river. So
Make sure you get. Somebody wanted to know if it was bolted in,
hey,
or is it? You can't hear me? Okay. Hello. Hello. Oh my mic. Oh,
no,
hold on. One second. Mic. Default mic. Let's do this one. Can you hear this one? Hello. 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 All right. Doesn't matter.
says something's wrong. Okay, so now will you hold up the fingers? What time tomorrow in Nubia for Belonging Beyond Brown?
5 p.m. Eastern. Look at the
5
thing. Look.
p.m. 5 p.m.
Okay.
Eastern
All
time.
right.
Okay,
All
so
right.
y'all come on in. It's gonna be a good conversation. Folks are there. I think the United States plays the Dominican Republic in the World Baseball Classic today. Good luck to the Dominicans, the Africans of the Dominicans. The United States almost got put out last week. I think this will be the end today. I don't care who you got pitching. Cy Young could pitch, but Cy
Testing.
Young ain't gonna help you.
Can
I
you hear
think the
me?
Dominicans got too much heat on them, boy. Because when you got Vlad Guerrero Jr. and not Sammy Sosa, my God, uh, the young boy for the Mets, Juan Soto, it's gonna be interesting. And
Can
Monday
you hear?
night,
Can you hear me
Born in
now?
Blackness,
Can you
part
hear me now? Can
four.
you hear me?
We're doing
Nope.
the wages of the Python God. That's part 4, chapter 22, Shatter Zones. I don't know what happened. Chapter 23, Negro Seguros, which means black insurance. This is going to deal with Haiti. Chapter 24, the slave rush. Chapter 25, bargains sharp and sinful. And chapter 26, the spread of the West African slave trade. It might be my speakers. Let me go to system settings and see, Prof. Because if everybody else can hear, can you all hear? If y'all can
Yes.
hear,
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
output,
We
speakers, no,
just need to hear
input,
you.
microphone. Well, it's not me. Can y'all hear?
Yes,
I
yes.
can't hear.
We can hear
Okay, you
you.
got it?
We can hear you, but you can't hear me. So it's okay.
Right.
It's all right.
You can't hear me.
We love you. I
Okay.
love you. And
Well, we getting ready to go. Listen,
yes,
I
yes,
love
yes, yes.
y'all.
So let me put this in.
Love you, Prof. Listen, thank you. And
Thank
yeah,
you.
you're gonna play the end. This is the video from the Selma National Historical Center, and you see I'm glad you actually did this. This is a little partition there. It's a temporary partition. Just above it, you see a little symbol there. That is from the Alabama State Human Rights uh, Center, which is on the campus of Alabama State University. Love you all.
Love you. All right.
Selma National Park Service, Selma-to-Montgomery Center. We're in the main auditorium. Exhibition, self-discovery, freedom, and struggle in the African experience. Jim Skinner, bust depicting Dr. William E. Colvin. Wow. Beautiful area here. You can tell these are maybe high school students. Look at these mannequins. Oh, wow. It's the Snick Singers. I have never seen a place like that. Dr. King right there. Wow. Stars for Freedom. Oh, yes. Selma to Montgomery. Look at that. Like an idea whose time has come. Not even the marching of mighty armies can halt us. We are moving to the land of freedom. Our latest stop in our intellectual CSI. So here, Brother Fonte is on that stage, part of the Stars for Freedom concerts. Wow. Here we go. Some of the things the marshals wore on the march. Look at Fred David Gray with Solomon C. and Charles Conley. There's Fred Gray. That's why we're here. The aftermath of the march, Klan behavior. Another auditorium. Wow. Look at that. With that arc of the moral universe bending toward justice. Rufus Lewis. Oh, these are the heroes. Alabama State. This is what we're talking about. What a fantastic moment. That's why you go everywhere, y'all. You gotta see it all. Your vote is the one that counts. Your vote is the one that counts. Register. Strive toward freedom. Look at that. Student demonstrators. Wow. All right. The great Gwendolyn Patton, Tuskegee. Detroit, by the way, of Tuskegee. The moral purity of the student's purpose warded off the enveloping gloom that black people's freedom was not on Alabama's agenda. Here we go. Look at that. I got freedom on my mind. Let us shade to the new ancestor, JoAnn Blackman Bland, foot soldier, educator, veteran mother, grandmother, and friend. Ashe. This is where you go. The Selma-to-Montgomery National Memorial Trail. At the gateway to the campus of the Alabama State University, 1867. You see across the street there, Alabama State. And if you look across the street from the sign, you will see two houses